Hi, my name is George Coles, and I am an avid retro video game collector.
Do a barrel roll!
I have decided to document my journeys as I grow my collection. Please join me as I share with you my finds. Welcome to Retro Game Treasure Hunting. Hi everybody, my name is George Coles, as the opener just said, and this is Retro Game Treasure Hunting. Now we're going to talk about some finds I made. All these I got at my local store, and again you'll see there's a common theme through most of these videos. We're going to start off with the one thing that's not like the other. ECW Hardcore Revolution for the Sega Dreamcast. And if you might know, this is the first Sega Dreamcast game that's come up on the show. This is a game that when it came out back in the day, I'm a huge pro wrestling fan and even huger ECW fan, if that makes any sense. So this game to me was highly anticipated. Now, I probably should have tempered that a bit because, as we're going to talk about in a minute, of who was making it. First off, this is the first game for ECW, and if you're a wrestling fan and you don't know what ECW was, it was a promotion that ran from about 93 to 2001 and basically changed the face of professional wrestling. It was a smaller promotion. It was at the three. There were the big three, WWF, WCW, and ECW, which was the lesser of the big three, but still, it made its impact on the other two. I loved ECW. It was based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At the time, I was living in the area, and this was just amazing. So I was extremely hyped to know that they were coming out with a game for this. However, we get the game, and it's nearly identical to WWF Attitude, which was another game that wasn't so great. And that's where it starts to unravel. Basically, most of the wrestlers have all of the same moves, save a finisher or a couple specialties, but it's all very much the same. The game controls are terrible. It's punch, kick, grab, and half the time you're punching and not hitting someone standing in front of you, or kicking or grabbing at someone, which isn't fun. It's kind of cartoony with how easily you bleed in the game, which ECW is known as a hardcore company, so I think they put that in there. The thing that got me the most is in the same era, we see GameCube games coming out from THQ and Aki, WCW versus NWO. We have, or WCW versus NWO Revenge, WWF No Mercy, WWF 2000, and some of the greatest wrestling games of all time are being made in the same period, and we got this dumpster fire. One of the cool things is that a lot of the ECW guys, this is the only game they're on. Now that's good and bad. It's good that they got a game. Bad that it's this game. So to say I was majorly disappointed, I mentioned to Paul when I was talking to him, Paul, my friend Papa Pickett from Gamers Never Grow Up, go check out their channel as well, that this is the most disappointed I've ever been in a licensed title. And to go with that, let's go into our ratings. Now, for the ratings, to be fair, I'm going to give the graphics a 3 out of 5, 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. They're not terrible. You pretty much know what every wrestler is. They're not as crisp and clean as the graphics of today, but they're on par. And what I compared them to was WWF Royal Rumble, which came out for the Dreamcast as well, and also some of the Dreamcast fighting games. And they kind of were on par with that, so I can't really hate on the graphics. Graphic-wise, the arenas look decent, the mats look decent. The wrestlers were noticeable, some of them better than others, but even today that plagues wrestling games. Some of the wrestlers don't really look like what they look like in real life, and this is almost 20 years later, so I digress. Gameplay, I give it a 1. The gameplay is absolutely horrendous on this game. It's terrible. Difficulty, I give it a 2. You could punch and kick your way to every win, and it's not going to be fun, but you can do it. Replay value, I give it a 1. Really no reason to play this at all. Even play it back. Music-wise, I give it a 1. It's very crappy MIDI versions of ECW music. Overall, I give the game a 1. There is really no reason you should ever buy this game. Now that I've said that, I have 2 versions of this. I have this copy, the Dreamcast one, and I have the Nintendo 64 version, which is the exact same game. The reason, again, I'm a huge ECW fan. So to me, this was like I think a $4 game. The $4 was worth it just to see those 3 letters and to have Rob Van Dam on the cover with Jerry Lynn. And, you know, it's terrible, it really is, but to me it was more of a nostalgia trip to buy it than it was the game itself. Coming off of that, we're going to go into some familiar territory. If you might have watched my videos before, I've explained that I'm going and getting a lot of GameCube games while the market's relatively low on them. And I got 3 GameCube games that we're going to go through, and they're all Nintendo proprietary, which I recommend. Nintendo proprietary games seem to hold value the best and seem to gain value. First of which, 1080 Avalanche. The sequel to the Nintendo 64 hit 1080. It's one of those games that's a super fun game to play with a bunch of people. Also, it could be really fun by yourself. It's got broadband on there, which I don't know if that means we could still connect it to the internet. I haven't tried yet. But it's a fun game. There's some things that are lacking. There's not a great amount of levels. But there's enough there. There's enough stuff that you can open up, enough different gameplay issues that makes it fun and interesting. Came out basically in the height of the extreme sports games like Dave Mirra BMX, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, even SSX and SSX Tricky. It's more on the game side of it than it is realistic. In other words, you could do stuff in this game that no snowboarder's ever been able to do in real life. But that being said, it's still an extremely fun game. Coming from that, let's go right into our breakdown on the ratings. Graphic-wise, I give it a 3. Again, about on par what you would expect from this genre in that era. Gameplay, I give it a 4. It is really fun to play. Difficulty, I give it a 3. There is a little bit of a learning curve to get into it, but once you get that learning curve, it becomes easy, if you know what I mean. So it takes a little bit to get it. Once you get it, you got it, and it's good. Replay value, I'm going to give this a 5. This is one of those games that you can, every time that you have friends over, you can pop it in and you're going to have fun with it. Music, I give it a 2. It leans very heavy on the rap metal scene of the time for the ambient music of the game, which is about what every other extreme sports game did. But to me, that's still a crutch a bit. Overall, I give this game a 3. I think it's good. If you're a person that plays games with other people or has friends come over to play some of these retro games, this is probably one that you're going to want to pick up. It's still relatively cheap. I think it may have been $10. But it's a really fun game. You're going to have a good time even if you're playing by yourself. Overall, again, I give it a 3. I think it's a really fun game. Now, keeping on that theme, with another Nintendo proprietary game, Wario World. Now, this game just gives me a smile. It's a beat-em-up type game. You play basically as Wario for the first time in a game. It's really interesting. not too difficult of a game. It's not groundbreaking like other Mario-related titles are, but it's a fun, really, really fun game. I enjoy playing as Wario, playing it from that aspect of it. I enjoy the beat 'em up, the style. It's very fluid. It's very fun to play. If I were to compare it to anything, it's very comparable with a Donkey Kong Country type style, and I really, really enjoy this game. To me, this is a must-own if you're going to start collecting GameCube games. There's probably about 5 or 10 of them that are on that list, and this, I would say, is one of the 5 to 10 that you have to add to your library. With all that being said, let's go into our ratings for it. Graphic-wise, I give it a 5. The graphics are amazing, as most Nintendo side-scrolling games are. They look beautiful, it's fun, it doesn't look too dated today, even though it does a bit for the age. Gameplay, I give it a 5. It's extremely fun and fluid to play. Difficulty, I give it a 3. There is a little bit where you get to learn on how to roll around and what you need to do. Once again, that's not too hard to pick up and play. Replay value, I give this a 5. I think it's something you could go back to over and over and over again. Music-wise, the ambient music in the game is some really good music. I give that a 4. Overall, I think the game's a 5. I really think that the whole total package of what you get with this makes it, like I said, I consider this a must-own for GameCube collectors. If you're starting your GameCube collection, or you're going back and adding some and don't have this title, you really need to look for it and get it into your collection. Now, last but not least, it's one of the GameCube's most iconic games, Metroid Prime. Much like I said about Wario World, I believe that this is also a must-own game for the system. It's your first 3D version of a Metroid game. It's a first-person shooter. You play it from that aspect. It plays a lot like the original Halo game. To me, this is the best first-person shooter on the system. Now, I know that there's a couple different versions of Metroid Prime that have came out, and the first few versions had some bugs to them, so they cleaned it up into later releases. So you might want to check that out. There's articles on the internet about that. I'm pretty sure that the Player's Choice version, the one that I have, is a clean version, is a bug-free version, which is cool. Again, I'm collecting this game more so to play it than I would be to resell it at a future point. So to me, I'm more interested in how the game plays. Again, 1000%, if you're doing a GameCube collection, this is a must-own game. Coming off of that, let's go right into our ratings. Now, before I mention that, I said to my local store that this game was one of my top 5 games of all time. I don't hinder that. I don't disagree with that. And I can't really think of others that might be in there. Breath of the Wild, I put in there. This game, maybe Resident Evil Director's Cut. Realistically, WWE No Mercy in there. And, depending on the time of day, other games will make it in there. But this is definitely a pillar in my top 5 or top 10 games ever played. I think it's that good. I think it's really a game that you need to have if you have a GameCube. With that being said, graphic-wise, we're going to go into our ratings. Graphic-wise, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. I think the graphics still look good, still hold up well. There is some things that playing it now after almost 20 years later that you're going to want to do with a shooter that you can't with this game. And you got to remember that they hadn't yet flushed out where most shooters have the same controllers. That really wouldn't come into play till the Halo era. When Halo came out, it kind of set the okay, the trigger's here, analog, this analog moves your head, this one moves your body. It really didn't get fleshed out to then. So there is some limitations, but I don't think it affects the gameplay too much once you get to that. Difficulty, I give it a 5. It's got that nice dichotomy of being easy enough to pick up and play, but hard enough that it challenges you. And that's what that's where I like to get a game, right in that sweet spot, where it's not overly hard, it's not to the level of like a Dark Souls type game, or something of that nature, where it's difficult, but you will be able to beat it. Replay value, I give it a 5. Again, it's one of my favorite games for the system, probably one of my favorite games ever. Ambient music-wise, the music, I'm going to give a 5. It's beautiful music. I say this over and over again with the proprietary Nintendo games. They have some of the best music that's ever been used on video games. Overall, as you can see, this is an easy 5. This is the first game that I've reviewed that I picked up again that gets a 5 all across the board. I really think it is that good of a game, and I really think it's one that you should pick up and definitely own if you're a GameCube collector, if you're a Nintendo collector, if you're a multi-system collector. I'm a multi-system collector. I know you see a lot of GameCube games that I've brought through here, but I'm kind of focusing on that right now because I do believe there's going to be a boom really soon and the GameCube games are going to shoot up in value. But a really must own. Both of these games, if you're going to start a GameCube collection, I would say both of these are must own. This one, the 1080, I would say, I would put it in probably should own. I wouldn't necessarily say it's necessary to own like these two, but you probably should get it because it is fun. Now, in the first game in the video, and last on this, ECW Hardcore Revolution. Don't buy it unless you're an ECW fan or a wrestling fan. It may be something cool to get Jerry Lynn and Rob Van Dam to sign at some point at a convention. To me, it's just to have a piece of actual ECW memorabilia, not WWE ECW memorabilia. In other words, something that WWE's produced. It's something that was actually produced during the time that ECW was still around. So to me, that's why it's important. To most people, it's a terrible game. It's one of the worst wrestling games that has ever been made. There's no value to it other than that. With all that being said, these have been my finds. My name is George Game. I almost said George Game. My name is George Coles, and this is Retro Game Treasure Hunting.